Hello everyone, this is Chase the Channel. My name is Kirill and we talk about watches here. Today we have one of the most titled Swiss brands, Longines, and one of the most recognizable shapes, the Super Compressor. This is truly a legendary diver, and legendary diver is not just a figure of speech. The collection is actually named that way. And this model was provided to us by the store chasterclub.com, which has been selling original watches of various brands, including the Longines brand, for over 20 years. All links will be in the description. We are greeted not only by the recognizable shape of the case, but also by light sandy tones. The case itself has a number of interesting, curious details, apart from these two crowns. By the way, they are not branded. They have this interesting ribbed structure. The stripes intersect each other perpendicularly, and this same texture is found on the already branded buckle. The crowns are responsible for rotating the inner bezel, the upper one, and for rotating the hands and date, the lower one. So, interesting points about the case. The first point is absolutely complete polishing, zero satin finish, zero matte surfaces. Everything shines, sparkles. Look especially at how beautifully the strap is reflected here. Incredible. Another interesting point is the very long lugs. Look, their length is just enormous. They also slope slightly downward and in relation to the case itself really look decent. I would also note the dome-shaped glass, sapphire with internal multi-layer anti-reflective coating. But I think attentive viewers have already realized that this is sapphire with anti-reflective coating, because in such glasses, light sources are always well reflected, as we can observe now. But under the glass, we are greeted by a beautiful dial. In the center, there is a smoky effect, such a beige, light brown shade, transitioning to the edge into a dark, into black, and in fact, the inner disc itself, the inner bezel, has a black color. It also has a slight tilt, and it also has a full marking for all 60 minutes or 60 seconds, whichever is more convenient. Green triangle, 3 numbers. On the dial itself, the numbers are smaller, 6, 9, 12. Huge markers, indices. There's also the Super Luminova luminescent material, which is also on the hands. Look at the hands. The hour hand is pencil-shaped, very thin, elegant, but the hour hand with a huge triangular tip here too is luminescent material. The second hand, simple, long, but the date window, the black disc, fits perfectly into the overall concept because it doesn't draw too much attention. And of course, the logo. It is worth pausing on the history of the brand because it is one of the most recognizable global watch brands in principle, and because for the first time we have Longines on the channel. In 1832, in the Swiss town of Saint-Imier, a man named Auguste Agassiz started working in a shop selling watch parts. A year later, together with 2 partners, he founded a company for the production and sale of pocket watches. And by 1852, both partners had retired from the business, and Auguste himself handed over the business to his nephew, Ernest Francillon. And it was his entrepreneurial instinct that suggested combining different stages of production under one roof. Thus, in 1866, the Longines factory appeared, named after the place where it is still located today. In 1867, the first L28 mechanism was released. Just imagine, brands like Rolex and Audemars Piguet don't even exist yet, and here their own mechanisms are already coming out. Moreover, for the first time in history, winding and setting the hands is done not with a key, but with a winding crown, as we are used to now. And actually Longines were the first, not only in this, For example, at the end of the 19th century, the trademark was registered, and the Longines trademark is today the oldest of the active ones. The company was also the first in the world to use an automatic chronograph to time an 80-meter race, and later to measure the first non-stop flight across the Atlantic from New York to Paris. And there are many more accolades for the brand, too many to count. Today, however, we are more interested in the late 50s. In 1958, a collection of diving watches was released, and a year later, the famous Super Compressor. And in 2007, we see a kind of reincarnation. More precisely, since 2007, there have been many variations, but they all practically reproduce those very famous Longines from the 50s in their original form. So let's, for example, compare. I happened to come across a book where one of these variations is depicted. What's the difference? The difference is as follows. Firstly, the appearance of the date. Secondly, of course, here the glass is sapphire, whereas it was plastic before. I would also like to point out the crowns. Take a look. Previously, they were smaller in size. Now, of course, they have increased, but overall, the design has remained unchanged. Even the same long lugs were there. I always like it when brands not only reincarnate their old models, but do it almost one-to-one, preserving this historical identity. Inside a modern caliber, the exclusive Longines L888 movement, 72 hours of power reserve, resistance to magnetic fields, and of course for urban use, for modern everyday use, this is what you need. Finally, the crowns. What do we do with them? And we unscrew them. They are naturally screw down. The upper one rotates that very inner bezel in both directions without any difficulties. That is, it rotates easily. We can do this to measure time, for example, up to 1 minute or even up to 1 hour. So if it's up to a minute, the count starts right now. For example, the second hand passed the triangle, and when it passes, for instance right here, we will understand that 15 seconds have passed. I think there's no need to explain how to use this bezel as a chronograph. And the lower crown is for using the stop seconds mechanism. The second position, we change the hands. They, by the way, are sensitive and quickly respond to the movement of the crown. The date change here happens a bit earlier, that is around 11:30 it starts to gradually change. And around 5 to 12 it already clicks over to the next number. The hour hand does not obscure the date window, pay attention. Well, the date itself already changes in the first position, counterclockwise. Of course, don't forget to screw the crowns back in, especially if water contact is expected. Interesting pattern in the dark Super Luminova, bright green. We see the triangle on the bezel, then some dots opposite the hour markers, 3 stripes opposite 6, 9 and 12. And of course the hands. The hands are bright, readability in the dark is excellent. This is how the watch sits on the wrist. Here, due to these lugs, the height reached 52.5 millimeters at their edges, while the diameter is not that large at 42 millimeters, and a small thickness of 12.7 millimeters. I really like the strap, both visually and tactilely. Textile width 22 millimeters. There are additional leather elements here. By the way, a few holes the watch will fit a wrist somewhere from 16 to 20 centimeters. The total weight is quite small, 87 grams. Of course, one of the ergonomic advantages of this super compressor shape is the absence of a crown at 3 o'clock. That means we can bend our wrist and nothing will dig in at this spot. Convenient for everyday use. Plus, the appearance will attract attention. After all, you don't always come across such shapes, and this option is primarily, probably, with a sporty orientation and perhaps with a casual orientation. Also, let's not forget that this is a diver's watch, so leisure and vacations are the perfect match. At the end, I would like to highlight some points about this watch. Of course, it's an attractive compact diver. It's an option for those who don't want to see the clutter of these rotating bezels. Everything is hidden under the glass here, and because of this, the watch probably has a more refined look, I guess. But, of course, the two crowns make a rather bold statement. Super compressor, and this shape, of course, has been known for years in the watch industry. By purchasing such a watch, you're not just acquiring a Swiss model, but also a piece of history. By the way, the Longines brand offers you the chance to step into the truly top Swiss league at a fairly reasonable price. And interestingly, this model also has a women's paired version. Of course, its style, its quality, its reliability, and elegance of form. You can purchase models from the Legend Diver collection by the brand Longines at the store chasterclub.com. Moreover, we have different color options to suit any taste. At the end, I would like to know your opinion about this model. Be sure to leave it in the comments below the video. And if you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. That's all for now. Goodbye, everyone.